What would you do if your mother, wife, or daughter went out for a simple bike ride and never returned? Imagine the panic, the confusion, the worry that would take over as you wait for them to come back, only to realize they're not coming. This is the haunting reality that Suzanne Morphew's family faced on May 10, 2020. Suzanne, a 49-year-old wife and mother from Maysville, Colorado, set out for an early morning bike ride that would change everything. She had been known as an active woman, someone who loved outdoor activities, and it was no surprise that on that particular Sunday morning, she decided to take a ride in the beautiful mountain town she called home. But what was supposed to be a peaceful outing turned into an unimaginable nightmare. By late morning, Suzanne still hadn't returned. Concerned, her family began to search for her, but there were no signs of where she might be. Her bike was found abandoned, but no clues could explain what had happened. No one knew if she had simply gotten lost, had an accident, or if something much darker had occurred. As authorities launched a massive search, the case quickly gained attention. Questions arose and theories began to spread. Was Suzanne's disappearance an unfortunate accident, or was there a more sinister reason behind it? As the investigation unfolded, more troubling details came to light, especially surrounding her husband, Barry Morphew. Barry, who initially cooperated with law enforcement, soon found himself under intense scrutiny. His behavior, his timeline, and even some disturbing searches on his phone made investigators and the public question if he had played a role in Suzanne's disappearance. Could a husband be responsible for the disappearance of his wife? Or was there something else at play? In today's video, we'll break down the timeline of Suzanne's mysterious disappearance, the extensive investigation that followed, the suspicions surrounding Barry Morphew, and the many unanswered questions that continue to haunt her case. As we explore this story, we'll dig into the evidence, the theories, and the possibilities that still remain. Join us as we try to uncover the truth behind the disappearance of Suzanne Morphew and what might have happened to her that fateful day. Suzanne Morphew was a woman who seemed to have it all: a loving family, a fulfilling life in a peaceful town, and a heart full of kindness. She was a dedicated wife and mother, living in the serene mountains of Maysville, Colorado, where she and her husband, Barry, had built a life together. At 49 years old, Suzanne was in the prime of her life, with so much to look forward to. She had two beautiful daughters who meant the world to her, and those who knew her described her as a devoted, caring, and active mother. Suzanne's love for her family was evident in everything she did. She made sure to spend quality time with her daughters, supporting them through life's challenges and guiding them with love and wisdom. Whether it was attending school events or spending weekends together in the outdoors, Suzanne was the heart of her family. Suzanne was also known for her passion for fitness and outdoor activities. She loved to hike, bike, and immerse herself in nature's beauty, which was easy to do living in the breathtaking Colorado mountains. She was the type of person who took care of herself and motivated others to do the same. Her fitness regimen and active lifestyle were a reflection of her vibrant personality, always on the move, always pushing herself, and always encouraging those around her to live life to the fullest. For Suzanne, the mountains weren't just a backdrop for her life. They were a part of who she was. The quiet mornings, the fresh air, and the natural beauty around her were a peaceful constant that brought her happiness. This peaceful life, one filled with love, family, and personal achievement, seemed perfect to anyone who looked in from the outside. But on the morning of May 10, 2020, everything changed. Suzanne's disappearance was not just a loss to her family. It sent shockwaves through the entire community of Maysville. That Sunday morning, Suzanne set out for a bike ride. It wasn't unusual for her to go out on her bike early, taking in the calm of the morning while staying active. Suzanne had always loved the outdoors, and the bike ride was one of her favorite ways to connect with nature. She was experienced. She knew the trails well, and it should have been just another peaceful ride. But that day, Suzanne would not return home. Her family began to worry when hours passed and Suzanne still hadn't come back. By noon, her daughters were frantic. Suzanne's husband, Barry, who had initially stayed calm, quickly called authorities when he realized she was missing. The search began immediately, with family members, friends, and volunteers all coming together to find Suzanne. But the search would not be easy. When Suzanne's bike was found, abandoned along a quiet trail, the worry turned to fear. There were no signs of her. No footprints, no sign of struggle, and no indication of where she might have gone. It was as if Suzanne had simply disappeared into thin air. The discovery of Suzanne's bike was the first clue, but it only raised more questions. What had happened to her? Was it an accident, or was something more sinister at play? Had Suzanne gotten lost, or was there foul play involved? As the hours passed, and the days stretched into weeks, the answers remained elusive. Suzanne's family was devastated. They couldn't understand how someone so full of life, someone so loved, could just vanish without a trace. Her daughters struggled to make sense of what had happened to their mother. The tight-knit community in Maysville, who had known Suzanne for years, was equally shaken. This quiet, peaceful town had been rocked by an event no one could have foreseen. The search for Suzanne became more intense, as law enforcement, volunteers, and even search dogs scoured the mountains, hoping for any sign that could lead them to her. But with each passing day, the mystery deepened. How could a mother, a wife, a woman who was so close to her family, simply vanish without a trace? The more authorities looked into Suzanne's disappearance, the more strange details began to emerge. Was it a tragic accident, or was there something darker lurking behind her sudden disappearance? As the investigation progressed, suspicions about Suzanne's husband, Barry Morphew, began to surface, adding even more complexity to the case. Suzanne's disappearance not only devastated her family, but it also raised many questions that have yet to be answered. Was she the victim of a random crime, or was there something more personal involved? The lack of answers left her family, the community, and everyone following the case desperate for closure. What happened to Suzanne Morphew on that fateful morning in May? Was it an accident, a crime of opportunity, or something even more sinister? The search for the truth would continue, but for now, Suzanne's family and the community in Maysville could only hold on to the hope that one day, they would find the answers they so desperately sought. On the morning of May 10, 2020, Suzanne Morphew left her home in Maysville, Colorado, to go on what was supposed to be a peaceful solo bike ride. The morning was calm, with a cool mountain breeze in the air, and Suzanne, a 49-year-old mother and wife, was known for her love of fitness and outdoor activities. She often rode her bike along the quiet trails that wound through the beautiful Colorado landscape, finding solace in the early morning hours. That morning, Suzanne's husband, Barry Morphew, saw her off around 5:30 a.m., just before she set out. It was a normal part of their routine, Suzanne heading out for exercise and Barry going about his own activities. But as the day went on, something didn't feel right. Suzanne hadn't returned by the time her family expected, and concern began to grow. By late morning, the reality set in. Suzanne was nowhere to be found. Her family became frantic. They knew something was wrong, but no one could understand how something so simple, a solitary bike ride, could lead to such an unsettling turn of events. Barry, increasingly worried as time passed, reported his wife missing a few hours after she had set out. The authorities quickly launched a search for Suzanne. Law enforcement, friends, family, and volunteers all joined in, combing the area where Suzanne was last seen. Hours stretched into the afternoon, and there was still no sign of her. The search was growing more urgent by the minute. But even with so many people looking, the minutes continued to tick by with no answers. Then, a significant clue emerged. Suzanne's bike was discovered along a trail, but there was no sign of Suzanne herself. Her helmet was found nearby, but there was no evidence to explain her disappearance. The bike and helmet were in an area that was familiar to Suzanne. She had ridden those trails countless times, but no one could make sense of what had happened. The absence of Suzanne raised immediate concerns. There were no signs of injury or struggle, nothing to suggest she had been attacked or had fallen into any sort of danger. Her bike wasn't far from where it was usually left, and her helmet was found in an area close by. But what did it mean? Was Suzanne in trouble? Had something happened to her on the ride? Or was there another explanation entirely? The fact that Suzanne's bike was found without any indication of what had happened was a troubling mystery. There was no blood, no tire marks, and no obvious disturbance around the bike. Just a helmet and an abandoned piece of equipment. But where was Suzanne? The more investigators looked, the more questions piled up. Was she lost? Had she fallen and hurt herself? Or was this the result of something much darker? No one could be sure. The lack of evidence left everyone in a state of uncertainty. Suzanne had vanished without a trace, and the only clue left behind was the bike and the helmet, which seemed to lead to more questions than answers. As authorities began to widen the search, they also began to look at other possibilities. Was this just a tragic accident? Or was Suzanne's disappearance part of something much more sinister? In the days that followed, the investigation deepened. A simple bike ride had turned into an urgent search for a missing person, and as hours turned into days, the hope for answers grew dimmer. For Suzanne's family, this sudden turn of events was nothing short of a nightmare. What had started as a regular morning quickly escalated into a desperate search for a loved one. No one could understand how Suzanne, a mother and wife so beloved, could simply disappear from a trail she knew so well. Every minute that passed without any new information made it harder to hold on to hope. What was supposed to be a relaxing ride turned into one of the most mysterious disappearances the small town of Maysville had ever seen. No one could have predicted that a morning bike ride would end in such a haunting, unanswered mystery. And as the investigation continued, more questions would arise, and Suzanne's family would be left waiting for the answers they so desperately needed. The moment Suzanne Morphew was reported missing, a massive search effort was launched. The peaceful town of Maysville, Colorado, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight, as law enforcement, volunteers, and even search dogs were deployed in a frantic attempt to find her. The community rallied together, combing the surrounding areas with one question on their minds. Where was Suzanne? Days turned into weeks as teams of people searched the vast, rugged terrain. They scoured trails, forests, and remote mountain paths, hoping to find any trace of Suzanne. But despite their efforts, there was no sign of her. No clues, no physical evidence. Not even a trace of the loving wife and mother who had vanished without a word. The searchers were left with only questions and the growing sense that something wasn't right. Every day that passed without any new information only deepened the mystery. Was it simply an accident? Had Suzanne fallen, or had she gotten lost in the wilderness, unable to find her way home? Or was there something more sinister at play here? Something far darker than anyone had considered? As the days wore on, law enforcement expanded their investigation to include not only the physical search efforts but also a closer look at Suzanne's digital footprint. It was a logical next step, one that could potentially offer some clue as to where she had been or who she might have interacted with. Authorities began combing through Suzanne's phone records, hoping to find some indication of where she had gone or if she had reached out to anyone in distress. But what they discovered was perplexing. There was no record of any phone calls or text messages, no indication that Suzanne had been in any sort of distress. The silence on her phone was unsettling. In an age where communication is constant, the absence of any messages or calls raised alarm bells. It was as if Suzanne had simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but an abandoned bike and an eerie void where her presence once was. Further investigation into Suzanne's fitness apps revealed another dead end. There were no unusual activities recorded, no signs that Suzanne had gone off course during her bike ride. Her apps showed regular, everyday activities, nothing that could explain her disappearance or give investigators any new leads. There were no sudden deviations from her usual routes, no unexpected stops. Her routine seemed normal, yet she was now gone without a trace. As authorities dug deeper into the digital evidence, the unsettling realization began to settle in. There were no obvious signs that Suzanne had met with foul play, nor was there any evidence to suggest an accident had occurred. There were no alarming text messages, no signs of panic, and no red flags that would indicate something had gone terribly wrong during her bike ride. Yet, despite the lack of hard evidence, something still didn't add up. It was as if Suzanne had simply disappeared from her own life, With no new leads and no definitive answers, the search for Suzanne Morphew grew increasingly frustrating for her family, the authorities, and the public. Each day without progress felt like a cruel reminder that Suzanne was still out there somewhere, and no one knew where or what had happened to her. Was she the victim of an accident, lost in the vast mountain wilderness? Or had something far more sinister happened? Something that was hidden just beyond the reach of investigators? The silence surrounding Suzanne's case was deafening. As the days passed, the search for answers continued, but with each passing moment, the question loomed larger. Where was Suzanne Morphew, and what had really happened to her on that quiet morning in May? As the search for Suzanne Morphew continued and hope began to fade, investigators turned their attention to a person who had been close to Suzanne every day of her life, her husband, Barry Morphew. Initially, Barry had fully cooperated with authorities. He appeared devastated by his wife's sudden disappearance, and at first glance, he seemed to be just another victim of a terrible, unexplained event. But as the investigation unfolded, cracks began to form in his story, and suspicion started to rise. Barry's timeline of events on the day of Suzanne's disappearance began to draw attention. He told authorities that he had spent the morning searching for Suzanne, showing concern for her safety. But his actions were becoming increasingly difficult to verify. The details he provided about his whereabouts and what he had been doing that day seemed inconsistent. For example, Barry claimed to have been out searching for Suzanne almost immediately after she was reported missing. Yet, no one could verify the exact locations where he had been. Authorities found it strange that no clear evidence supported Barry's claim of being actively involved in the search for his wife. His actions were raising more questions than answers. To make matters worse, Barry's behavior during the investigation didn't sit right with some people. He was seen as cold and detached, offering very little in the way of emotional support for his daughters or Suzanne's family. In fact, he refused to cooperate with investigators fully. His lack of openness about certain details seemed odd, especially when compared to how devastated a person in his position would likely be. The media quickly picked up on these contradictions, and the public's perception of Barry began to shift. What had started as concern for a grieving husband quickly turned into suspicion. The media coverage only intensified from there. As investigators dug deeper, Barry became the central figure in the case. The public's eye was trained on him, and rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed that Barry was hiding something. Others began to wonder if he was, in fact, the person responsible for Suzanne's disappearance. The constant media coverage and the relentless speculation began to create an atmosphere of doubt and distrust. Barry's every move was scrutinized, and the suspicion surrounding him grew by the day. Yet, despite all the rumors, there was no direct evidence linking Barry to Suzanne's disappearance. The authorities had no concrete proof that he had harmed his wife. They were left with only circumstantial evidence, a set of questions that could not be answered by any clear facts. The case seemed like a puzzle with too many pieces missing. Months went by, and Suzanne's case remained unsolved. But in April 2021, nearly a year after her disappearance, the authorities took a dramatic step. Barry Morphew was arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of his wife. The announcement sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. Suzanne's family was left to grapple with the idea that someone they had known and trusted could be capable of such a heinous crime. But while the arrest marked a new chapter in the case, it also raised even more questions. What had led authorities to charge Barry? And what evidence did they have to support such a serious accusation? The authorities alleged that Barry had killed Suzanne, but the evidence to fully support these claims was scant. Prosecutors pointed to his behavior, his refusal to cooperate with the investigation, and inconsistencies in his timeline as key reasons for their suspicion. Yet, there was still no physical evidence tying Barry directly to Suzanne's death. No body had been found, and no clear motive had been established. The case against Barry was largely built on circumstantial evidence and the mounting public suspicion. Despite the charge, there remained a sense of uncertainty. Was Barry guilty of murdering Suzanne? Or was he simply a man caught in the crosshairs of a high-profile case, his actions misinterpreted and misunderstood? The lack of hard evidence left many people wondering if the authorities had jumped to conclusions too soon. The arrest of Barry Morphew only deepened the mystery. Suzanne's disappearance, which had once seemed like a tragic accident, was now being painted as a calculated and deliberate crime. But the lack of clear answers left many to wonder what the true story was. What had really happened to Suzanne that morning in May 2020? Had she been murdered by the person closest to her? Or was there something else at play? Something more complex, something even darker? As the trial date approached, the case was set to capture the public's attention once again. The search for the truth in Suzanne Morphew's disappearance was far from over. The trial of Barry Morphew would bring new revelations, and possibly new evidence, that could either confirm the accusations or exonerate him. But for now, Suzanne's family, the community, and the public were left in limbo, waiting for answers that were still elusive. What happened to Suzanne Morphew on that fateful morning? Did her husband, Barry, play a role in her disappearance, or was he wrongly accused? The case was far from over, and as more information came to light, the true story of Suzanne's fate would continue to unfold. As we reach the present day in Suzanne Morphew's case, Barry Morphew's fate remains in the hands of the legal system. His case has yet to go to trial, and the uncertainty surrounding the prosecution's evidence continues to cast a shadow over the entire investigation. The case has gained national attention, but the true facts remain shrouded in mystery, leaving many wondering if justice will ever truly be served. The prosecution has presented a number of pieces of evidence in their bid to charge Barry with the first-degree murder of his wife. Some of the most significant evidence they've cited includes forensic findings, such as DNA recovered from Suzanne's personal items. This evidence suggests that Barry was in close proximity to Suzanne in the days leading up to her disappearance. But the details remain unclear. What exactly do these DNA samples prove? Was this enough to connect Barry to his wife's presumed death? Or is it simply circumstantial evidence? The lack of a body complicates matters, making it difficult to establish a clear link between Barry and the crime. One of the more chilling pieces of evidence presented by the prosecution involves a search conducted on Barry Morphew's phone. Investigators found a troubling query on his device, a search for how to dispose of a body. This search, made just days after Suzanne went missing, has fueled speculation about Barry's potential involvement. How did this search come to be? Was it a moment of panic, or does it point to a more sinister motive? The prosecution argues that this search indicates that Barry may have been planning to conceal his wife's murder, while the defense has vehemently denied any wrongdoing. The search for answers becomes even more complex as Barry's defense team argues that the evidence presented is far from conclusive. They claim that there is no solid proof connecting Barry to Suzanne's death. In fact, they suggest that Suzanne could have disappeared on her own, voluntarily choosing to leave her family behind and start a new life. While this theory may seem far-fetched to some, the defense insists that there's no definitive evidence to prove otherwise. Without clear and convincing evidence, they argue that Barry should not be presumed guilty. Furthermore, the defense proposes another theory, that Suzanne may have been the victim of another unknown party. This suggestion introduces the possibility of an outside force being responsible for her disappearance, though no clear suspects have been identified. Could there be someone else out there who knows what happened to Suzanne? Or was Suzanne's disappearance a tragic accident that spiraled into something far more complicated? As the case continues to unfold, the public's perception of Barry Morphew is deeply divided. Some people remain convinced that he is guilty of his wife's murder, pointing to the circumstantial evidence and the troubling phone search. Others argue that the evidence is far from clear and that Barry could be the victim of a miscarriage of justice. The uncertainty surrounding the case is frustrating for Suzanne's family, the community, and the public at large, as they are left waiting for the trial to begin, hoping that the truth will finally come to light. With no clear resolution in sight, the question remains, what happened to Suzanne Morphew? Was her husband involved in her disappearance, or has he been wrongfully accused? As the trial date approaches, the answers to these questions may finally be revealed. But for now, Suzanne's family and the community continue to search for the truth, clinging to the hope that justice will eventually be served. Was Suzanne Morphew's disappearance the tragic result of an unfortunate accident, or was something darker at play? As the investigation into her case unfolded, the questions surrounding her fate only grew more complex. On one side, some speculate that her husband, Barry Morphew, could have been responsible for her disappearance. Others, however, wonder if Suzanne chose to leave voluntarily due to personal issues, while some even believe that a third party might have been involved, someone who abducted Suzanne or caused her harm. The uncertainty surrounding Suzanne's fate has led to numerous theories, each trying to fill the void left by the lack of solid evidence. For many, the most unsettling possibility is that Barry, someone who should have been the closest to Suzanne, may have played a role in her disappearance. His actions, especially in the days following Suzanne's vanishing, have raised numerous red flags. Barry's behavior, his refusal to cooperate fully with investigators, and his inconsistent statements, has led some to believe that he knows more than he's letting on. Was he hiding the truth, or was he simply misunderstood during a traumatic event? Others have argued that Suzanne may have disappeared on her own. Some have pointed to personal struggles she may have been facing in her marriage or her life. Was she dealing with issues that led her to make the decision to leave? Could Suzanne have intentionally vanished, seeking a fresh start away from her family and the life she knew? This theory, though less popular, suggests that Suzanne might have staged her own disappearance, or perhaps suffered an accident while attempting to leave on her own terms. But with no body, no goodbye, and no solid evidence supporting this, the theory only adds to the mystery. Another possibility that cannot be overlooked is the chance that Suzanne was taken by someone else, perhaps a third party who is still out there. There is the possibility that she became the victim of foul play, someone with malicious intent who may have abducted her. Could Suzanne have been targeted by a stranger, or was there someone with a personal vendetta who took her? There have been no firm leads pointing to an outside perpetrator, but the idea that Suzanne could have been kidnapped or met with harm by someone else is a chilling thought. Despite the arrest of Barry Morphew, the one thing that remains painfully certain is that Suzanne's body has never been found. This leaves the investigation in a state of limbo. Without physical evidence, no body, no weapon, no clear sign of foul play, it's difficult to know with any certainty what happened that morning. The lack of answers has left everyone grasping at straws, trying to piece together a narrative that makes sense. What really happened to Suzanne that fateful morning in May 2020? Was it an accident? A tragedy that could have been avoided? Did her husband, Barry, play a role in her disappearance? Or was he simply the one left to deal with the aftermath of an unforeseen event? What dark secrets might be hidden, yet to be uncovered? And then there's Barry himself. Why did he act the way he did in the days following Suzanne's disappearance? Was it the behavior of a man whose wife was truly missing, or someone trying to cover his tracks? His refusal to cooperate fully with investigators, his strange behavior, and the unsettling phone search for how to dispose of a body. All of these elements have made Barry's role in this story even more enigmatic. But the question remains, could he have had something to do with Suzanne's disappearance? Or is he the victim of circumstantial evidence and media speculation? The truth is, despite the arrest and all the theories swirling around, we still don't know what happened to Suzanne Morphew. Could there be clues that are still hidden, waiting to be discovered? With no body and few concrete answers, the case remains an unsolved mystery, and Suzanne's family, the investigators, and the public continue to search for the truth. As more evidence comes to light, perhaps we will finally understand what really happened to Suzanne. But for now, the questions continue to linger, leaving a community and a family to wonder if they will ever find closure. What happened to Suzanne Morphew? The answers remain elusive, but the search for truth presses on. As of now, Barry Morphew remains out on bail, and the case surrounding his wife's disappearance is still ongoing. Suzanne Morphew's family, the community, and the public are all waiting for the truth to emerge. After months of speculation, arrests, and unanswered questions, the hunt for evidence continues. Investigators remain dedicated to piecing together the puzzle of Suzanne's disappearance, but the mystery still looms large. While Suzanne's family holds on to hope, they're left with more questions than answers. The pain of not knowing what happened to Suzanne is compounded by the fact that no body has ever been found. Without her, and without the concrete evidence that could confirm what happened, every theory about her disappearance remains just that, a theory. Did Suzanne fall victim to foul play? Was she the victim of an accident? Or could she have left voluntarily? No one can say for sure. The arrest of Barry Morphew raised more questions than it answered. While there are some forensic pieces of evidence and troubling details surrounding Barry's actions, there's still no definitive proof that links him directly to Suzanne's death. His behavior has raised suspicion, but for some, it's not enough to convict. Now, Barry remains out on bail, awaiting his day in court. The pressure is mounting, and as the legal proceedings move forward, the stakes only get higher. As the case continues, Suzanne's family is left hoping that the truth will eventually be revealed. The clock is ticking, and with each passing day, the uncertainty surrounding Suzanne's fate only deepens. Will we ever truly know what happened to Suzanne Morphew? Was she taken by someone else? Or is there more to the story that we haven't uncovered yet? The search for answers remains ongoing, but until then, Suzanne's loved ones continue to wait and hope that justice will eventually prevail. In the end, only time will tell if the truth will come to light and bring closure to the family still grieving the disappearance of their beloved Suzanne. Suzanne Morphew's disappearance remains one of the most heartbreaking and perplexing mysteries in recent memory. Her family, the tight-knit community of Maysville, and everyone following the case are still searching for answers. Was Suzanne a victim of foul play, or did a tragic accident occur on that quiet morning in May 2020? The unanswered questions continue to haunt those who loved her, and the lack of closure has made this story all the more painful. No matter the circumstances, one thing is certain. Suzanne's story is far from over. The investigation remains open, and her family refuses to give up hope that one day, the truth will come to light. As the case progresses, we watch as new theories are explored, and fresh evidence is uncovered. Could Barry Morphew truly be responsible for his wife's disappearance? Or is there another explanation that no one has considered yet? Will the truth finally emerge from the shadows? And will Suzanne's family ever find peace? What do you think happened to Suzanne Morphew? Was she taken by a third party? Or could someone close to her have played a role in her disappearance? The possibilities are endless, but the answers remain elusive. We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you believe happened to Suzanne, and where do you think the investigation is headed? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you can stay up to date with more true crime stories and updates on this ongoing case. Suzanne's disappearance may still be a mystery, but together, we can continue to follow the trail in the hopes that one day, the truth will finally come to light.